miners. Today we're going to be checking out pfSense, so let's get right into it. All right, guys. So you may be wondering, why do I need pfSense and what is pfSense? Because not everybody I know knows what pfSense is or does. We're going to kind of go into it a little bit today, as well as I will be doing a general installation of pfSense. I won't be actually covering like a full in-depth guide of pfSense because there is so much to learn about pfSense. If you haven't seen the video that Linus Tech Tips recently did, is they did a home router video, which was actually super useful, especially if any of you guys are trying to get into Flux nodes and you guys have an ISP router. So let's go over some things why pfSense will make sense to you guys. Get it? Sense? Okay. So your ISP router, it's not just a router, right? It does all the actual LAN routing, as well as your incoming connection from your ISP, as well as it also manages all your Wi-Fi connectivity, right? So it's doing all these other things. It's like an all-in-one unit. And it used to not be that way years ago, right? But everybody's kind of migrated to this all-in-one package. But the problem is with that, though, is usually the ISP like all-in-one solution only has maybe 1, 2, or 3 core processors in them. So what ends up happening, and they also have very little RAM. So what the issue becomes is there's not enough compute power to actually even give you your full bandwidth sometimes. So I know this from experience when I have my CenturyLink fiber, their actual little all-in-one solution actually didn't even give me my full speed because the actual processor inside of the router wouldn't even it doesn't have the compute power necessary to even give me my speed. What you can do is, and I will let you guys know this in advance, there's 2 ways that you guys can do pfSense, I think, at least from what I think would be easy deployable solutions. One, you could use a VM. So if you have like a PowerEdge server or a spare computer at home, or you can make an actual dedicated like pfSense box essentially. But in either case, whether you do the VM or if you decide to do the actual standalone box, which I would suggest something like an old Dell Optiplex, but you will need, for either solution, you will need a dual NIC card. And the reason for that is why Mining King, why are we gonna need 2 network connections for one, actual piece of hardware? Well, think about it this way. When you have your router from your ISP, right, it doesn't only just have one connection, right? It has an incoming connection, and usually an ISP router usually has, about 4 or 5 LAN connections, right? So I will let you know, though, if you do decide to do this route, you won't have Wi-Fi, so you'll need to get an access point. Or if you guys really want, you could repurpose an old Wi-Fi router. But I suggest actually getting an actual access point from something like Draytech or Ubiquiti. So the reason for the dual NIC is going to be, one is going to be for our outgoing connection out to the world, right? Which is our WAN connection. So this way you could obviously have your internet, right? That's coming into your house. The other port is going to be your LAN. So I do suggest not getting like 4 or 5 port NICs because setting the pfSense up to actually be a router and a switch is a little difficult, and depending upon your piece of hardware you select, it may not have enough resources for this. So I suggest having a router and then getting a switch. So when you kind of get into this level of networking, you're really stepping out of like the average home user. So this will cost you an investment. And it's up to you guys how far you guys want to take it. But essentially, what you could do is if you still want to use your ISP router, you could put it what's called bridge mode. And essentially, that will bridge the connection over to either your VM or your pfSense box. And this way, if you guys are having issues with UPnP with your nodes, because let's say your UPnP isn't working from your ISP router. I know a lot of people have problems with UPnP getting it to work, but this is a way to actually get it to work. So because you're putting the pfSense in front of the router. So let's get into how to actually install pfSense. And I'm going to be doing this on a VM. So this way you guys can understand how to do it. I'm going to be doing it in ESXi. You can either do this in Unraid or you can do this as well in Proxmox. So all three of the hypervisors you could do this on. pfSense is free and open source, so it won't cost you guys anything to use pfSense. So I just searched pfSense, right? And what comes up? pfSense.org. We're going to click here. We want to click downloads. Okay. Now you're going to want to pick your architecture. Most likely everybody's going to pick the AMD 64-bit. That's what I suggest. So, and then you're going to want the DVD image ISO installer. Okay. So now it's going to depend though. So if you're doing it on a VM, you're going to want the ISO installer. If not, you're going to want the USB memstick installer. If you're doing it on like an actual pfSense box, like you're repurposing the computer, because you want to make sure that the hard drive is absolutely clean, because pfSense is an operating system. So you don't need to like preload like Ubuntu or anything on there. pfSense is its own thing. So you would click download the ISO image installer. We're going to click download. And well, wait, I've already downloaded it. So we're going to skip ahead to the next section, but you would just download this. So we need to go to my ESXi server. So we're over here at my ESXi server, or this is one of my many servers I have at my house. So we need to actually upload this ISO image to the storage. So we're going to click on data store 1. Now, once you do finish downloading it though, if you can't send it as a zip file, it needs to be uncompressed. So you would right click here and then do extract files, which is then going to make this folder here for pfSense. And inside of this pfSense folder is going to be this ISO image. And then you're going to click open, right? And then it would upload this to your ESXi server, which I have tons of ISO images in here. I use a lot of different ones. So you can see the pfSense is on here. So once it's uploaded to your data storage, you then want to come over to your virtual machines. And then we're going to click create VM. And then we're going to do Linux. And then we're going to do Ubuntu 64-bit. And then we'll call it pfSense test. And then you hit next. Now, it's going to really depend on how much stuff you have running in your house and like what kind of internet speed is and what you're trying to do over your network. Like, are you running a SAN? You doing like all this other stuff across your network, right? This is really going to depend on your settings for your network. Everybody's mileage is going to vary, right? You don't need a lot of cores typically, but let's just say we're going to give it 6 virtual cores, and we're going to do that over 3 cores per socket. So it's essentially 3 cores and 6 threads. That's pretty good. So it shouldn't need a whole lot more. And then we'll give it like 8 gigs of RAM, right? So that should get you by, you know what I mean? If you need to adjust this, you can always shut down the pfSense server and then always increase more. Now, if you are installing this on a bare metal server, like a spare computer, like the Optiplex, you will need a keyboard and mouse and actually be at the actual computer while you're doing the installation through the USB stick. But once you've downloaded the USB stick, once I start the installation process here on the VM itself, it will be exactly the same. So you'll just have to actually download that and use probably, I'm assuming, Rufus to copy the image to the USB drive pretty much the exact same way that we do with HiveOS. So, and you really shouldn't need a bunch of storage. You know what I mean? You can give it like 25 gigs. And what I like to do is I'm going to do thin provisioned, independent, persistent. And the reason we're doing thin provisioned is it's only going to use as much storage as it goes along and as it needs. So if it doesn't need that much, it's not going to use all of it. We're going to take off the SCSI controller because we're doing SATA. And then we're going to come up. So once you have and this is the one I need for the actual internet. So once you have your all the settings and you're on the final part, and we need to click on our ISO image, which is going to be pfSense. Okay, we're going to click next, and we're going to click finished, right? And now the VM has populated, but before we do that, we have to go back and do one step, okay? Which is we need to come over here to our networking. So the next step we need to do is we actually need to add another physical switch, because there's one switch controlling the actual NIC itself right now that all the information's going through, essentially. So we need to add another one. We need to add a virtual switch. And then you could see that there's all of these ones here that are down. Now, the only reason they say down is because there's nothing connected to it right now, right? But I do know the one I connected directly next to this one is VM NIC 1, and I would click that, okay? And then you're going to want to give it a name. We could call it pfSense test. Okay, so once we make the virtual switch, we then need to come over here to port groups and add a port group to this. And we're going to name it pfSense. Okay. And now we have that one. And now there's, as you can see, there's no active ports. So let's go ahead, and now we need to go back to our pfSense virtual machine, and we need to click edit. And then we're going to add a network adapter, and then it automatically chose the other one that we're obviously not using, which is the pfSense one. So now that we have everything set up here, then we're going to power on the server. And you don't have to even press anything here. You can just not press it and just let it auto boot. So the first screen that you come up to once it boots, and this will be the exact same thing if you're booting from the USB drive or creating a VM. You're then wanting to click accept. You're going to want to do install pfSense, because obviously we don't have. You're going to do continue with the default key map. And then you're going to put the guided route on ZFS. So click next. And then you're going to click proceed with installation. And then now this is the part that's up to you. So you can have a mirror drive, you can do RAID. I just do a stripe, no redundancy. But that's up to you. You could do a mirror, you could do, RAID, whatever you guys want to do. This part's up to you. Okay. We're just going to do stripe for this demonstration. We're going to stripe it. Okay, then we need to do spacebar, and you see how it did the little star? If you don't press spacebar right here, you're not going to get past this. It's going to keep saying that there is no drive. So once you push spacebar, you see the little star up there. You click enter, and then it's going to tell you, hey, if you proceed with this, it's going to destroy everything. So make sure if there's anything on the drive, you obviously back it up before you do this part. Hit enter, and away we go. pfSense is now installing. So now it says the finished installation is done, blah, blah, blah. Would you like to open a shell in the new system to make any final manual modifications? I'm just going to put no. And it says we need to reboot. I highly recommend not setting up the VLANs in the command line. So we're going to put no. And this is what it's going to ask you on the reboot. We're going to put no. And then it's going to ask what you want to do for your LAN interface. So this is where your two NICs are going to come in, right? So I know that my second NIC, the VMX1, is the NIC I'm going to be using for my LAN, right? Which is going to be to go to a switch to give out, to go to a switch so that way your local area network gets connectivity. So this is where you need to tell it what NIC you want to use for your wide area network and your local area network. So just be sure that you have your internet cable plugged into the correct network interface card, or else you're not going to get any connectivity. So we're going to put VMX0 is going to be the one we're going to use for internet connectivity. And then now it's going to ask me what I want to use for my local area network. And we're going to use the second one, which is VMX1, and then enter. And then it's going to ask if you want to proceed with these settings, and we're going to say yes. So now it's going to configure them really quick, and we're going to let it do its thing. But then you're probably like, Mining King, I don't want to do a bunch of command line. We're almost through the command line to where we get to the GUI part and we do things from the web page instead of doing things inside of the Linux commands. All right, after the installation is complete, you are going to have to type another command to get in here. Once you're at the menu, you need to type 8 to go to the shell, and then you're going to do pfctl space -d, which will disable your firewall. So this way we could set it up. So now it says pf disabled, and this is compliments of Mr. Yeti because I forgot. All right, guys, we're on to the next step here. Yeah, I know I look different and lighting's different and all that stuff. So obviously more than one take on this video. So after you complete the next step, after you put the pfctl -d, you'll then be able to put in the IP address of your pf server, the local address. So it'll say right there on that screen. So as you can see on the screen here, it does show that the DHCP is 10.10.2.17. So that's the address we need to enter after we put in that command. So now we're here, and you're going to get this. Click advanced, click continue, and here we are. We're at pf. So the stock password for pfSense is going to be admin pfSense. Okay, and then you could obviously, there's a wizard here if you want to use it. You guys are more than welcome to use this. It's actually pretty easy. It has a couple things here in the beginning, but we're going to call this, the king test here. If you have a domain for your DNS, and all that stuff here, you can put that in there, and your primary DNS server, all that other crap. And then you can put exactly where you're located. It doesn't really matter. I don't care. Now you're going to get into your WAN configuration. So depending upon how your WAN is set up, whether you get a static IP or you're on DHCP or whatever, right? You need to configure it the way how you previously had it on your router, okay? Because I can't say for everybody because I don't know everybody's internet connectivity. Could be anything, right? So typically you would do DHCP, but if I did do this at my house, mine would actually be PPPoE because I have to log in to get my internet connectivity. Some people are like that, some people are not, but this is what I would do. And then typically if you leave it blank, it's just going to make it 1500, which is pretty standard for the MTU. You could leave this blank, and then you would have your PPPoE login information here, which I'm not going to fill in. And now you're going to need to configure your LAN, right? So most typical home networks are on the 192.168 home network. I went 10.10.10 just so it's just not the same, right? So I mean, you can make it, you can go 20.20.1.1, right? Or whatever you want it to do. So but this would be your LAN IP address here, and it's on a /24 subnet. So we click next, and then it wants you obviously change the password. I don't care because this is just a test, so I'm just going to leave it the same. But this is where you would reset your guys' password for pfSense. So we're going to come over here, hit next, and then you can click check for updates if you want to see if there's some, maybe depending on your version of pfSense you downloaded, you should be pretty good to go. Okay, so now that we got the WAN and LAN and we've done all the basic configuration stuff of the wizard, right? We need to actually set some firewall rules in here, or else we're gonna keep constantly locking ourselves out of our pfSense, and we'll have to keep using that pfCTL-D, which disables the firewall to let you back in, because you can lock yourself out of pfSense very easily. So let's go ahead and let's get at least the local area network talking, and then we'll do the wide area network where you could actually remote in if you wanted to and manage this from another location. So we're going to go to firewall, and then we're going to go to rules, because essentially pfSense is not like a home router, right? It's not going to be able to recognize, like, to keep certain ports open so that you have the ability to talk to it. This is very advanced. It's meant for advanced users. You have to tell it exactly what you want it to do all the time. Do not ever think that anything in pfSense is ever automated, because it isn't. If you're not telling it what to do, it's not going to do it. So we're going to do a pass, WAN. We're going to change this to IPv4. We're going to do TCP, UDP, source. We will keep as any. And then we will go down to the destination, and we're going to change it to WAN address. Okay. And then on the ports, you can go from other and set custom ranges. But instead of other, we're going to do HTTP 80. And then, or something like that, right? So this way you know why you made this rule. And then under gateway, also make this the default gateway if that is your gateway. If it isn't, so forth, right? So we're going to save, and we're going to apply. So now you'll know if you set a firewall rule and it locks you out. The way to know if it locks you out is if you hit save and then apply, and all you see it just constantly spinning, right? Like it can't load the web page. That means you locked yourself out. So then you have to do the pfCTL-D to get back in, undo that command you did, and figure out what you did wrong. So let's go ahead, and we're going to add another firewall up top. The next firewall that we're going to be setting is going to be the HTTPS protocol. So we're going to do TCP UDP. We're going to do source as any. And then we're going to change the destination to WAN address. We're going to come over here to our destination port range, and we're going to do HTTPS, which is port 443. So then we would come over here down to our advanced options, and then we're going to choose our default gateway. We're going to hit this. We're going to hit save, and then now that is perfect. Now let's say you want to be able to SSH into this. We are also going to set that firewall as well. So now that we clicked add, now we're going to come over here, IPv4, TCP, UDP. We're going to change it from any to the WAN address, and then we're on the custom port. We're going to leave it as other, but this time we're going to enter in 2222, and the same thing on the other side, 2222. So this way you can remote putty in, right? Like if you use putty or something like that. So this way you'll be able to do that, and you can leave a description like NAT SSH. So then we come down here to the advanced gateway here, and we would set the gateway. And then we click apply. And there you go. We now have at least just the basic firewalls in order for you guys to participate. I did mention that this thing can do UPnP, so let's go ahead, let's go check that out real quick and go over some basic setup on how to actually do that. So we're going to come over here to services, and then we're going to come over here to UPnP and NAT PnP. Okay. And then you're going to want to enable UPnP. You're going to want to enable UPnP port mapping. And then if you wanted to do the NAT PnP mapping, you can do that as well. It says Apple devices, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's necessary. Now you're going to want to tell it, though, what interface you want. You want to pick the source where the client resides in. So obviously your stuff doesn't reside in the WAN. We would want to choose our local area network or our LAN. We would pick LAN, and that's pretty much it. So we're gonna hit save, and then there you go. She is good to go. So I know I didn't really get too in depth to this. Um, it's kind of up to you guys and how you set this up. I just have this running on my PowerEdge server, so it's not really. You can make your VM in your PowerEdge server do this if this is what you want it to do, but just remember you need to have an incoming port and and you need another. You have to use one of the other ports going out. Same with your like an old Optiplex. You're gonna need two NICs. You're gonna need one coming in for your WAN, one for your LAN going out, as well as you'll need to buy a switch. Do not try to do all the routing, like have all the devices like get a 4 or 5 port NIC and try to plug everything into it. Just don't do that. Just pass everything off to the switch. Let me know if you guys like this kind of content. This was kind of like a generic video a little bit. I just want to show everybody pfSense. So the reason that this is useful, or at least for me or for other people who are into nodes, what you can essentially do is you could bridge your router, or let's say for somebody who doesn't have, say somebody just has an ISP router, right? And their UPnP, it doesn't work, or maybe it doesn't have it. I don't know. Everybody's different. But let's just say they don't have that. They could bridge their connection to pfSense, and this way the internet is being passed through. So this way, essentially, their pfSense is their router and firewall, and now UPnP will work. So this is a solution or a workaround, if you would so speak, to get around not being able to use UPnP. If you guys want like another good video on how to set up pfSense, I know, I don't even know why I'm saying this, Linus Tech Tips, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, they did a great video on how to take an old computer and make it into a pfSense box. So really good content. I really like when people repurpose things and make use out of something else that would have been garbage. So you're able to actually set in as many resources as you want to this VM or this box if you want to use like a bare metal like computer, right? So this would have way more compute power than your typical ISP router. So this is a really good solution if you're even looking for a router upgrade, right? It won't cost you that much. The only issue is you'll have to buy a switch and an access point, because obviously this isn't a Wi-Fi router, so it's not going to do that. So it depends on your guys' needs and what you guys are looking for. Let me know if you guys like this content or this video. And thank you, Yeti, for teaching me a lot of things lately, teaching me pfSense. I appreciate everything he's shown me here. It's been really fun learning all this kind of stuff. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys like the content, maybe I need to do another follow-up video, maybe on some other settings or something like that, or maybe some other stuff I know about pfSense. It gets a little tricky though, because everybody's situation's kind of different. So I just kind of wanted to keep it like a general video for everybody and not make it too complex, right? I just wanted to get pfSense installed, get it up, get it running, and then that's kind of it right there. All right, guys, this is the Money King giving you the most hashes, and I'll see you next time.